Here we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today on Wednesday for another study hall. So great to see so many of you from all over the world. Belarus, Mexico, I forget what else we have, Italy, and of course the United States. So thanks so much for joining us. We're really honored to have you here today. Before we get started and before I introduce our guest, I did want to draw your attention to we have a big sale going on right now on Napa Valley Wine Academy. Our proprietary certification courses are on sale, 50% off. They're 100% online. You can do them online. We have a great webinar series as well. So make sure and head over to napavalleywineacademy.com to check that out. But you're not there for a commercial, or you're not here for a commercial. You're here to learn something, and we're going to bring Karen Wetzel on, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about Valpolicella and Chianti. Hello, Karen. How are you today?
Hi, Christian. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to see you. We had a really fun time together doing trivia on Monday, so it's great to have you back here on Wednesday for a little study hall.
Thank you. Great to be back. And like you said, great to see all these international folks on board. That's so fun.
So what are you talking about today?
Well, I'm going back to Italy. I did white wines last time I did this, and so I'm going to go do some red wines. And I chose Chianti and Valpolicella because I think it's empowering to really understand how to read labels and all the nuances of the different levels. And these are two regions that really help drive those points home. So if you're a consumer, you'll learn a lot about label reading and how to choose a good wine. And if you're a student, this will really help you with your WSET or CSW or any of the studies that you're going through. So that's why we're doing this today.
Well, exciting. Great. So I know you have a presentation for us, so I'm going to switch to the presentation screen and let you take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks, Christian. Okay, guys. Well, thanks and welcome again. My name is Karen Wetzel, and I'm one of the instructors here at the Napa Valley Wine Academy. And so we are going to Italy today. I happen to be Italian. My last name is Trevisano. And so I'm happy to be walking you through some Italian wine. So we have our map here of Italy. And let's see, I think you can see my mouse, if I'm not mistaken. And so we're going to cover two regions today. We're going up here to the Veneto to talk about Valpolicella. And then, of course, I can't talk about Italy without going to Tuscany. So we're going to do some Chiantis from Tuscany as well. So why Italy? Why do we talk about Italy so much? Because it's very significant in our world. It is the number one producing wine in the world, which is great. And it's also the number three country in consumption. And when you think about that, the size, U.S. is number one, but don't let that fool you, considering, we're probably 5 times the size of Italy. So when you think of per capita, we're way behind, but we are number one in volume, and Italy is number three in volume. But boy, they sure beat us to death in per capita. So we're going to talk about red wine today. So I'll start you off getting you used to putting your fingers on the keyboard because I do have a few little pop quiz questions for you. So question, how much of Italy's wine production is red wine? Is it 70%, 43%, 57%, or 64%? So what do you guys think? Type in your best guess here. 70%, 43%, 57%, or 64%?
All right, this is the time for our viewers to be a little bit interactive and put your guesses into the chat box.
Yep. Oh, we have somebody else joining from Italy.
Yeah, that's great.
Nice to see you.
Okay. So we have some answers coming in here. 64, 57.
Yeah.
So far, it looks like 64 is the guess. 70 is another one. So Kimberly says 70. Leo says 57. Laura says 64. Carolyn says 64. Andras says 57. So,
okay.
What is it?
Well, Christian, yesterday we had a little problem. Not yesterday, Monday, when we did our trivia. I underestimated my audience, and I think everybody got 100% on my quiz. But today, I think I got them right where I want them. So actually, you'd be shocked to know, I was quite surprised that Italian production is really more white. But when you think about it, so this is our chart, and of course the red bars are red and the yellow bars represent white. And it is really offset, the white wine versus red wine production, by the Veneto. And you see that here in this first blue box that I put up there for you. So in the Veneto, what are the two most popular wines that we know of, the most high volume wines coming out of the Veneto? Would be Galera grape for Prosecco and Pinot Grigio. And that's a lot of volume in Italy. So that really eats up the clock pretty good for us. Now, the Veneto, the red wines there are things like Valpolicella. And then you look at Toscana, which I also outlined in blue for you. Now, that might be what some of you were thinking when you were choosing 70%, because in Tuscany, 70% of the wines coming there, maybe even more, are red. So all over Italy, we do, because of Prosecco and Pinot Grigio, it is really only 43% in volume. So kind of a fun fact there for you. So why are these label terms important to you? Well, it'll help you make an informed selection if you're a consumer. It also helps you understand the price to value relationship. What are you getting for the money that you're paying, and what do all those words mean? It also help you trade up. What I love about learning, my favorite thing about learning wine label terms is that when I go to the store, a lot of times I find that I can, because now I understand the labels, I can trade up to a wine that is at least theoretically going to be a better wine. And sometimes it's less than a wine that doesn't have certain terms on the label. So that's always fun. And, you can get bargains. And of course, if you're studying WSET or, like I said, CSW or anything like that, you really have to know these terms. So, this is at about a level 2 sliding into level 3 level of education here you'll get today. So, Italian wine labels, what I love about Italy, and like I said, I'm Italian, so I can poke a little fun at them. They don't like to make things easy. They really like to keep us guessing. And, here in America, we name our wines mostly for our grapes. And in France, they name their wines mostly for the regions or the grape. But in Italy, they just like to throw it all out there. So we have wines that are named for the grape. And you see this first label here, it's Aglianico, and that's a grape. And so we name it for the grape. And then we also name it for the region, like the region of Chianti. We don't tell you necessarily what the grape is because you don't need to know. If it's from Chianti, it must be mostly Sangiovese. We can also name it for the grape and the region. So here we have a label of Barbera d'Asti. Barbera is the grape, and it's from Asti. That little D apostrophe means that it's from. Sometimes you see Della, which could also mean the same thing. And then other ways we can name a grape is just to get downright creative. This is the La Volte from Ornellaia. It's an Italian blend. It's most probably Sangiovese, Cab, Merlot. It doesn't really fall within the qualifications to call it Chianti, or maybe they just don't want to. So we can get creative and name it for our dog or our truck or the street we grew up on, or a god of wine or anything we want. So that's what we call the creative labels. So that's a little confusing, I know. Now, other really important terms as we get started here, and these are not specific necessarily to Chianti or Valpolicella. This really falls under really all Italian wines. There's 4 major categories of wine label terms. Actually, the 4th one I didn't bother to put on there because it's at the bottom of the rung, and it's just called vino. And that just means it doesn't really have a lot of regulations. You see a lot of this wine being consumed in Italy. You don't see a lot of it over here. But anyway, for today's conversation, we're talking about better wines. And so we start at the bottom of our pyramid here with IGT wines. And this is the Indicazione Geografica Tipica. And this area, these are not letters or names that are associated with regions. So in other words, you would see Toscana IGT, or you might see Chianti DOCG, but these are regions, not grapes. You wouldn't see Pinot Grigio IGT. You would see Pinot Grigio Toscana IGT. So anyway, IGT is the beginning, and actually it was the last thing to be qualified, but we kind of started at the high end and worked our way down. But IGT means that there are regulations. If you're going to call yourself IGT Toscano, then you follow those rules, but they are less regulated than the pyramid, the rungs on the pyramid, the levels above them. You have more freedom of the area you're growing in. It's a wider area, the grape varieties you use, aging process, yields that you're allowed to have. And then as we move up the ladder, we go into the DOC. And this was really the original designation and is called Denominación de Origen Controlada. And this is, in other words, when you say you are from a region, Valpolicella DOC, you're going to follow those rules that were set out by the governing bodies of the region of Valpolicella DOC. And this could be things, these are regulations like we talked about, a smaller area, maybe requires hillsides, could be grape variety or grape varieties, alcohol minimums, production methods, aging processes, all of that. That's regulated. And if you want to put those that region, that Valpolicella DOC or whatever it is, you cannot put that on there unless you follow these rules. And then we have the top of the rung, and this is the DOCG. And so it's Denominación de Origen Controlada y Garantita. Now, don't get confused. It is guaranteed. That's what guaranteed means. However, they don't mean that you can walk into Italy with a bottle of wine in your hand and say, I don't like this wine. Can you take it back? No, it's what they're saying is that we are guaranteeing that we are going to go above and beyond the regulations and stipulations of the DOC. So you are really, if you move up to a DOCG, it's a way of understanding that, boy, I must be getting something even more special and even smaller production, smaller growing region, maybe a little more alcohol. The alcohol thing is not just yay for us, there's more alcohol in it. The idea is that grapes, you're probably getting riper grapes. And of course, riper grapes have more sugar. More sugar has higher potential alcohol. So it's really more of a ripening or a concentration thing, not so much just that everybody's looking for higher alcohol. Okay, so hopefully you understand that. All righty, if you have questions, just throw them on out there in the chat box and we'll be happy to answer them. And we'll just keep going. Okay, so now that you understand that pyramid, we're going to talk about some other pyramids within two different wine regions. And the first region we'll talk about is Valpolicella, first types of wines. So as I said, this is going to be up here in the Tuscan region. In the Veneto, circling Veneto and saying Tuscany. So we're gonna highlight that for you in a minute. So if you see here, let me back up one. So you see this green, all of this green, that is the Veneto. And then you see this area down here in purple near Verona, and that is the region, the broad region of Valpolicella. And within this region, there are 4 regions that use the term Valpolicella. So starting with the DOC, and that's the entire region, basically. Okay, then we narrow it down. There's a region of Ripasso, there's a region of Amarone, there's a region of Recioto. So let's take a look at that. And they're all within that purple splotch. So there are 4 wine appellations. And it's hard, I think, as Americans, for those of us who are American on the call, it's hard for us to think of these as 4 regions, not just 4 wines. And they are very, very different styles. But they are 4 wine appellations. Notice they all have the little DOC or DOCG after them. That tells you we're talking about regions. So Valpolicella, DOC, broad area. So has regulations, just not as tight of regulations as DOCG. And this is going to be a lighter bodied wine, and it comes from that broad area. Now the Valpolicella Ripasso DOC, and I'm going to go into production in a minute, but I just want to help you wrap your arms around this, is a little bit more intense wine coming from a specific area within the Valpolicella DOC. And this is and they have different winemaking regulations for this wine. And then you have at the bottom on the left, you have the Amarone della Valpolicella. That's an Amarone wine from Valpolicella DOCG. Again, very small region, full-bodied wines, specific wine production method. And then on the right, you have Recioto della Valpolicella DOCG. And this is what we call a straw wine or a sweet style wine, a dessert wine, if you will. So I want you to kind of keep this slide in your brain because I think this will help you. You can also kind of look at this slide. What I like about this is, and I just got this from the DOC Valpolicella, the consortio online, easy to find. But you can see even the colors that they put in the glasses, more intense color. And you're going to start to understand why as we go through the winemaking process. Okay, I see no questions posted yet, so I'll just keep going. So the broad-based Valpolicella DOC. Now, the principal grape for these wines is Corvina and Rondinella. There are a couple of other lesser grapes that are very tightly regulated in small amounts, not really enough for us to mention. And by the way, so I don't have to repeat it every time, Corvina and Rondinella are the the principal grapes for all 4 of these regions we're talking about. So I don't repeat it every slide. Valpolicella DOC is fermented in stainless steel to dry. So no sugar, no real residual sugar to speak of. It would not taste like a sweet wine. Minimum ABV, alcohol by volume, has to be 11%. If we add the word superiore to the label, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, then the requirement is 12%. And the maximum residual sugar is 7 grams per liter and a minimum of 1 year aging. Okay, so that kind of gets us started. So this gives us a style, think about it. It's lower alcohol, lower sugar, less aging, not a big oak influence. So young, light body, juicy, dry, very silky wine, not a terribly tannic wine, lively flavors, a lot of red fruit, cherry and plum and rose petal and very velvety texture, and incredibly versatile with food. This is my pizza wine, my pasta wine, my watching a movie, eating popcorn wine, just a nice casual wine. And these are not terribly expensive wines. It's not difficult to find them, in that low teens to find a good bottle of Valpolicella. I love what Ernest Hemingway said. He said about this in a book called Across the River and Into the Trees in 1950, that Valpolicella was a light, dry red wine, as friendly as the house of your brother. So I thought, that was pretty nice. I have a pretty friendly brother, so that made me smile because that is this wine. It's a crowd pleaser, so it's fun at a party. And then next, we're going to start narrowing the field here, and we're going to go to the region of Valpolicella Ripasso DOC. And this is also stainless steel fermented to dry. However, they have the secondary fermentation process using the Ripasso technique, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. You can see here the alcohol is creeping up again, the minimum alcohol, 2.5%. And the potential for the maximum sugar can be a little bit higher here because you're getting a more intense wine at 10 grams per liter. And this is a minimum of 1 year in barrels. The regular Valpolicella DOC is an option of a year, but it doesn't all have to be in barrel. This has to have a year in barrel. Now, what the heck is the Recioto technique? So this is I love this because it's sort of like cheating in a way to get a really better wine without paying too much for it. So Ripasso technique, the secondary fermentation on the residual Amarone skins for 7 to 10 days. So basically, and you'll learn a little bit more about Amarone, but we're going to make Amarone, and these are dried grapes, so they're very intense. Once the Amarone wine is finished, we press off the juice, and they're going to take those skins from this, really regulated wine, very concentrated wine, and bring them over and they're going to re-ferment or allow a little bit of a secondary fermentation on the juice from the Ripasso, on the pre-fermented juice from the Ripasso. There's going to be a little bit of unfermented sugar in the Amarone pomace, and that will trigger a secondary fermentation in the Valpolicella. So here, the wine gains alcohol and body and tannin and flavors and aromas. So, I kind of think of this like a baby Amarone because you're really getting a little bit of the best of both worlds. You're getting the value and the price for the Valpolicella, but you're really getting a lot of the concentration from the Amarone. So anyway, hope that's a fun fact for you to learn about. So since we're talking about Amarone, let's take a closer look. So Amarone della Valpolicella is a DOCG. So now very narrow region, much greater regulations. And here we use a technique called apasamiento. I love saying that word. I don't know why, apasamiento. And we do this before fermentation. I'm going to tell you what that is in a second. Let me get through the details. Amarone does get extended maceration. It's fermented at cooler temperatures so that it can extract all that color and flavor. Minimum ABV of 14%. So this is not one that you want to drink bottles of, although it's tempting because it's so good. Maximum grams per liter of sugar is 12, and we have to have that extra residual sugar for that higher ABV. You have to have sugar to ferment. If you don't have sugar, you don't have alcohol. So we have to have the little bit of sugar. 2 years of barrel aging. If we put the word Reserva on it, we would have to age it for 4 years. And this is where I mentioned the skins from the Amarone are now then going to be recycled through into Ripasso. So let's see, does the sugars balance the acidity in the Ripasso wine? Yes, sugar and acid really balance out a wine nicely. And you're right, the Valpolicella is going to be regular DOC is going to be juicier, will have a little more acidic flavor or notes to it, where you're right, the sugar and the Ripasso will warm that up a little, round it out a little bit. So great question. Thank you, Daryl. Okay, so the style of Amarone is going to be full-bodied. It's dry. It's made from dried grapes. I'm still going to get to that, I promise. And then you have these intense aromas of flavors of black cherry and prune, blackberry, maybe some fleshy plum, chocolate, baking spice, all of that. Very rich and complex, very round, very full-bodied wine. And it's going to go with big food like game and meat and aged cheeses. It's going to be great with that. So what is a pasamiento? I just love this comment here. So what we do is we harvest the grapes, and then we dry them in a ventilated room, a well-ventilated room called a frutario. And we do this for 3 to 4 months. And here the grapes are going to lose about 35 to 40% of their water. And that's going to enhance the aromas, the complexity, the flavors. In other words, you're starting to really get into using almost raisins, if you will. So that's how this happens. And I have a couple of pictures here for you. You can see the dried grapes in the racks there. And then, of course, the barrel aging. Let's see, we'll change. Let's see. I'm not sure I get that question. Sorry. Do you think the profile of the Valpolicella wines will change a lot now that a much higher percentage of Corvina is allowed? Yeah, when you're starting to introduce new grapes, I think the style will change a bit, but I don't think, Valpolicella is a loved wine. I don't think they're going to allow it to change too much, because it would really change the whole concept of what the wine should be. But anyway, and I love this statement too. Amarone is a piece of Baroque art. It is that much that is never too much, by Philippe de Vario, famous Franco-Italian art critic and writer from 2017. And I really love that, because it is so complex and so subject to your own interpretation that I think that that's a great way to describe it. So somebody else is asking about Valpolicella. Do you think the profile? Oh, sorry, I got it. Okay. All right, good. I think we answered that question already. So thank you for the question, Rosa. All righty. So now, last but not least, we talk about our Recioto della Valpolicella, DOCG. Again, region, small region. It's not Amarone, it's not Recioto. And so Recioto is considered Amarone's father, if you will. This wine was invented, if you will, or created before Amarone was. Both of these are made in very similar ways to begin with. They're both made in this exact same process with the dried grapes. But Recioto's fermentation is stopped to preserve the sugar content. So in other words, we start fermentation process. If you let a wine completely ferment, the yeast is going to keep eating all that sugar, and then you're going to have a dry wine. So what will happen is we will stop fermentation. We will filter out the yeast. We do not fortify here like we would a port, for instance. We actually just filter out the yeast, probably drop temperature too, I would guess. And then that's going to be our wine. We're going to have a little lower alcohol, and we're going to have a much sweeter wine because you're not allowing the yeast to eat all the sugar, where Amarone, conversely, is fermented to dry. Okay, so let's take a look at a side-by-side comparison. So Amarone versus Recioto. So Amarone Pasamiento that's that grape drying process for 90 to 120 days, where for Recioto, even more drying, so 120 to 150 days. So you can see here the water loss is about 10% more, 10% higher water loss for the Recioto. So even more raisin-like grapes. And of course, you know, think about eating the difference between a regular table grape or a raisin. The raisins are so much sweeter. And the more dry you get that raisin, the more concentrated and the sweeter the fruit inside gets. So fermentation and maceration for the Amarone is 30 to 40 days. It's going to be 50 to 60 days for Recioto. So we're really looking at a low, slow fermentation for both, frankly, and then allowing that skin contact to go on and on. And again, you know, 20 days more in the case of the Recioto. So you can imagine the additional color extraction, the additional tannin extraction, much bigger wine. But you have sugar in the Recioto to balance that. Now here, the Amarone is aged longer than the Recioto. So 2 to 10 years in barrel for Amarone, and 1 to 5 years in barrel or stainless, or a combination of the two for Recioto. And then the ABV is also considerably higher in Amarone, where it's lower ABV in the Recioto, because again, we're stopping fermentation toward the end to leave in some of that sweetness. And you can imagine getting up to 17% ABV, we're starting to head to, you know, toward, well, we're really over the limit of what most yeasts can perform and convert sugar to alcohol at. So anyway, you can see here, I think that ABV really brings it home. And then here's the finished product. So 12 grams per liter is the maximum residual sugar for the Amarone. But for Recioto, it's over 50 grams per liter. Now that is balanced nicely with some acidity that's left in the wine, but 50%, I mean, 50 grams per liter, that's, you know, we're talking about a dessert wine here. Okay. Oh, I missed a letter there. All right. I did this at the last second. So a little pop quiz here. We talked about this word very briefly. What does the word superiore refer to when we're talking about Valpolicella, or even Chianti for that matter? Is it a subzone, or is it something to do with vinification? What do you think? Is it a subzone or something to do with vinification? Let's see. Just type it up in the chat box if you would. Anybody want to participate in my little sabotage here? Subzone, Christina. Okay. Vinification. So we're getting a little bit of both. B. Okay. Subzone. All right. So we're getting a little bit. S. Oh, subzone. Okay, we're getting a little bit of everything here. So yeah, the answer is it is in the vinification. And if you remember back a couple of slides ago when we were talking about regular Valpolicella DOC, and I mentioned that is 11% ABV, where the Superiore, we have to ferment to 12% minimum ABV. So it is an alcohol thing. It's not just alcohol, it is also a little bit more hillsides, slightly lower yields, but it really is about that. Alcohol is the one indicator when we talk about Superiore. So good job on that, guys. Okay, one more quick pop quiz here. So what does the word classico refer to? Is it a geographic term, an aging term, or a winemaking style? In other words, if I say it's Valpolicella Classico, is it referring to a region, how long it's been aged, or how it's been made? What do we think? I don't have my Jeopardy music, so let's see what you guys think of this. This one I think is easier than the other one.
Okay, go ahead and put those answers into the comment box there.
Okay, winemaking.
We got coming in right now.
Geography. Well, we have some smarty guys here too. Well, it looks like we got answers all over the board, Christian.
Sure does. Okay, let's go ahead and reveal.
All righty. So it is actually geography, and let's see, who was it that mentioned Taz Peter said that it is jarred from the original site. So yes, the word Classico, and I'll just bring this up here now. The word Classico refers to the historic site of, in this case, Valpolicella, but it really could be Orvieto, could be Chianti, could be many regions use this term. It's the original historic center of a region. And of course, as things change, the region evolves a little bit and mostly gets bigger with popularity and all of that. And then there's also a term that I have to admit I didn't know until I started looking at Valpolicella, and this is specific to Valpolicella, is the Valpentina. And so if you look here on my little map on the right here, the Valpolicella DOC is all the light purple, right? And then the Classico region is this dark purple area, which was the original historic region. And then this Valpentina region is right here in this medium purple area in the middle. So these things all have significance. And again, label terms that if you're looking at a Valpolicella DOC and you see the term Valpentina, you're likely getting a better wine. It's a smaller growing region. Or if it says Classico, your chances are getting a little better wine. And then Superiore, we talked about, it's about 0.5% more ABV. It is best site, small yields, higher quality and concentration. So a little bit of all of the above, but mostly it's about the winemaking. Any questions about Valpolicella before I advance? I think you guys all have this down pretty good. I hope that you're sort of your eyes are opening to opportunities, shopping opportunities, if nothing else, your consumption opportunities. And next time you're in a store, especially a store that has a good Italian selection, check out their Valpolicellas and start to look at these labels and look at price, compare prices. And I think you'll see there's some good bargains out there. Okay, so on to Chianti. So now here we are going to the center of Italy, right here in the Tuscany region. My favorite region. So let me actually do this. So Chianti, the DOCG, and even the entry-level Chiantis are DOCGs. And it is this all this light pink is considered Chianti DOCG, okay? It is this dark pink, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is the Chianti Classico region, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So the hierarchy of Chianti. So all Chianti is DOCG, as you can see here. We start off with just regular old Chianti. If you call it Chianti, you have to put DOCG on it and you have to follow those rules. We'll talk about the rules in a moment. Next up the rung in smaller production, then we have Classico, which comes from that smaller region. Then we have Chianti Classico DOCG Reserva, and there's additional rules to that. So in other words, we already start off with a DOCG, so we already have really some of the highest rules in Italy, in Italian wine production. But with every new layer within the world of Chianti, it gets more and more strict. And then last but not least, we now have a new designation. Well, it's not so new anymore. I guess it's 10 years old, started with the 2010 vintage. We have this new designation called Gran Selezione. It's another word I like saying. And very small production. And we're going to talk about all these different designations and this hierarchy as we go through here. So first and foremost, Chianti, just regular old Chianti, but I want you to look really closely at this label because it says right here, Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita. So it is, in fact, a DOCG wine. You're looking at an $8 or $9 bottle of wine here, and yet it's a very, very good production wine. This is entry-level Chianti. It's light to medium bodied, going to have some nice high acidity. That mouth-watering acidity makes it super food friendly, lots of fruit flavors and softer tannin. We're going to blend this. You're allowed to, you have to use 70% Sangiovese. These are minimums. And then there's the 30% of what they call AOG, other authorized grapes, mostly Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc. There's a few others in there. And they do allow in entry-level Chianti 10% white grapes. We have a minimum aging 4 months. There are also 7 subzones within the Chianti region, and they require 4 months. In most of them, we require 4 months aging. And the minimum alcohol for a basic Chianti is 11.5%. And this brings something to mind to me. I happen to be flipping through our social media pages this morning, and there was an advertisement for low sugar wines. And I was looking at it and I thought, what's a low sugar wine? Well, Chianti is a low sugar wine. When you have low alcohol, chances are you have low sugar. So, I noticed when we were in Italy a couple of years ago, we sipped on wine pretty much all day long, and we never had a hangover. And then we come back to Napa and we're having dinner, and the next morning I wake up and I've got a headache. And it's really because a lot of these Italian wines really are nice and low in alcohol, but very, very enjoyable. So if you're one of these, I know right now low alcohol wines are kind of popular. So if you're one that's looking for opportunities to drink lower alcohol wines, this is a good one for you. So here we have our production. I'm going to compare it to a couple of other things momentarily, but it's pretty much what we just talked about. Aging for the subzones, 4 months. For the regular outside of those subzones, it's only 3 months. And this gives you tons per acre. But I really wanted you to look here at the alcohol content and the yield of 3,300 vines per hectare. We're going to see how that evolves here. So next in line is Chianti Superiore, and we already talked about this being a little higher in alcohol and also better vineyards. So it is part of the Chianti DOCG. It is not a separate region. It is part of the Chianti DOCG. And it is the better vineyards and hillsides within Chianti. It's a little stricter production method. It is same rules as far as the grape varieties go. Can have 10%, but it does have just a little bit more aging and 12% ABV, a little higher alcohol. The difference, well, we'll talk about it in a second. I'll show you the difference between that and Classico. So you can see here Chianti normal and Superiore. So we have a little bit higher alcohol, a little bit longer aging here. It says 9, maximum minimum age of the vineyards, a little older vineyards, a little lower production. You can see maximum grape production per vine. So you're getting a little lower production, almost a half the production. So you're going to always get more concentration with lower yields. So that gives you an idea. So now we're going to move to the Chianti Classico region. Our first 2 wines were not in the Classico region, and that is this little pink area right inside the Chianti region. And I'm showing you these labels again just to show you. In fact, I want to back up 1 second. So you would see here the word Superiore on this label here. That would be your indicator of slightly higher quality than a regular Chianti. So here we have our Chianti DOCG, again, just says Chianti Classico, and it has the DOCG designation underneath the words. This must come from that Classico region. And keep in mind, when we talked about Chianti, to begin with, I mentioned there were 7 subzones. Classico is not one of those. Classico is considered its own entity. It is not part of the Chianti DOCG. It is, in fact, its own DOCG. Even though think about the Chianti region wrapping around that Classico region. These are definitely better vineyards, higher elevation. You sometimes will see this called Annata as well as Classico. Higher percentage requirement for Sangiovese, a little longer aging process, a little higher ABV, about the same actually as Superiore. This is entry level in the Classico category, so lighter body, straightforward, pretty easy drinking, balanced freshness and soft tannins. And the difference here between the Superiore and the Classico is going to be really just the region, the elevation, the yields are going to be a little bit different, and the requirement of Sangiovese is just a little higher in Classico than the Superiore, but they're very, very close in style. And then next, we have our Chianti Classico Reserva. This is our DOCG. This is now not quite to the top of the pyramid yet. And so you see the word here, Reserva, on our label from Monsanto. It must come from the Classico DOCG. 80% Sangiovese, 20% other grapes. But this wine is subject to technical and sensory parameters, meaning that they're much more regulated and they go through a tasting panel, so they are evaluated. Minimum aging for 2 years in total. 3 of those months must be in the bottle minimum. And again, moving up the alcohol because the concentration of fruit, so 12.5% ABV. Now we're getting to that medium bodied, riper fruit. You're getting secondary aromas and flavors of oak, vanilla, spice, clove, more tannin here, more balanced acidity with structured tannin. And now you're getting into a wine that's more age-worthy. Up until now, the Chianti DOCG, the Superiore, and the Classico, lovely, easy drinking wines for today, not fantastic to do long-term aging. But once you get into Reserva, you definitely have a better opportunity for aging. And you'll see here, minimum of 12.5% ABV, but as you can see on our Monsanto label, this is actually 14%. That's okay. You just have minimums, not maximums. Well, the yeast will determine the maximum. So here we have a side-by-side comparison of Chianti Classico and Reserva. So you see it's very similar up here with production area and grape composition and even the yields. We start to change here at the 12.5%. We get into aging. Now you're really double the aging. I don't know if I agree with that not required barrel for Reserva. I don't know about that. I'm challenging that one. But anyway, you get the idea that it's just more of everything. And then lastly, we have the pinnacle, the top of the pyramid for Chianti Classico. It's called the Gran Selezione. And this, as I mentioned, is a new, a brand, really, 10 years old now, but a new designation. And what this was saying is that the vintners got together, the DOCG organization, the vintners petitioned the DOCG organizations and said, look, some of us are going even beyond the rules of the DOCG to make a wine that is, we feel, far superior, way smaller production. And we want a way to be able to, we want bragging rights. We want to be able to put this on a label to show the consumer that this is really the pinnacle, because the DOCG, the Reserva DOCG category there's a lot of wines out there. And so this was a way of really narrowing that down for the consumer. So lots of the similar rules as the Reserva. However, it has to be harvested and come from estate vineyards only. And the sensory and technical parameters are much more strict. The tasting panel is much more strict. Lots more aging, 30 months in oak, 13% higher ABV, much more age-worthy, silky, full, medium to full bodied. And you can see the designation here on our Badia Pasagnano is right here. It says Gran Selezione. And so this really, and if you haven't had the pleasure, they're not easy to find, and they are, they're up there in price, $60, $70, $80, maybe $100 in some cases. But if you have the opportunity, oh my gosh, they're just superb wines. They really are. So you can see here again, see the barrel aging thing is not right on here, but we see a little higher alcohol, but basically the requirements for Sangiovese are the same, but here the Gran Selezione is all estate grown. Okay. All right. Any questions? I haven't really been watching. I'm sorry. Oh, wait. No, nothing popped up. Christian, anything on your end before I start saying my little wrap up here?
No, please take it away. If there's any questions that you have, just pop them into that comment box and we'll try to get to them if we can. But go ahead, Karen.
Right. So Daryl wants to know, is this mostly stainless steel fermentation or other? In the case of Valpolicella, the Valpolicella, those are mostly stainless steel fermented, and then some barrel aging on the Amarone and then the Recioto. For Chianti, you can certainly ferment in stainless. Most often it's fermented in stainless. You can do concrete, but the aging is done in barrel. Okay. So that answered your question. So as we wrap it up here, again, just reiterating, if you're taking an exam, if you're taking formal studies, I hope that this sheds some light on all those layers and what all those terms mean. I know when you're just studying out of a book and these words are maybe in bold and you're making your flashcards, they're all in pieces and they're kind of scattered. But I hope that this really brings it home to you that It doesn't have to be so complicated. These are all just ways of letting the consumer know what's going on in the bottle. One of the things I love about WSET is it's such practical application, and it really is what is all about what's in the bottle. And for you consumers out there, and I'm hoping we have a bunch of you guys on there, make that informed selection and understand what you're paying for when you see these terms. Let's see, I'm getting our superiority. Can you go over tasting notes again?
Yeah, so just a quick, give some tasting note on a superiority.
Yeah, so the superiority, I assume you're talking about Chianti. So the Chianti, entry-level Chianti is going to be very light. You're starting to get more toward medium body, a little more richness in the wine. That cherry flavor starts to turn to black cherry and just a more developed flavor on the palate. Do we offer online classes? Oh my gosh, do we ever? Mary Angela. Christian, I'm gonna let you field that one. Do we offer online classes?
We do, yeah. We have several of our online classes on sale now for 50% off during these quarantine and difficult times. One of them is Discovering Italian Wine, where you will actually learn online more in depth about the 20 regions of wine regions of Italy. So highly recommend you check that out. Okay, so a lot of love coming through here for you today, Karen. We are running short on time, so I do want to say, thank you to everyone for joining us, and specifically thank you to you, Karen, for imparting all this great knowledge with everyone. Join us again here on Monday. We'll have another wine trivia Monday at 2 o'clock on our Facebook Live feed, and then on next Wednesday again, another study hall where you'll be given the opportunity to learn some new things or hone your theory knowledge on different topics. So we hope you can join us then. In the meantime, stay safe, be kind, and as always, drink well. Karen, thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Check us out on Instagram. You can ask your questions there. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.